I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Luc D'Abreau. I'm sorry if I'm messing that up, Luc. Luc's a managing partner for Make It Rain Capital. Actually has a pretty cool podcast of his own. Luc, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Jason. And you did a great job with my last name. That's exactly how I pronounce it. So we're either both right or we're both wrong.
Right. Perfect. We'll go with both right. Would you please just go ahead and let's dive into your background, kind of tell us about the start of your journey, go back as far as you want, even before real estate, and then we'll kind of take it down whatever avenue seems to make the most sense.
Yeah, good deal. So I think for me, it really starts with, so my dad, he wasn't born here in America. He ended up coming from Trinidad. And so he always had this like immigrant mentality. So when I was growing up, there was always like very much an entrepreneurial spirit. All of these things were very normal for me growing up. It's only been in retrospect as an adult seeing that he had so many different irons in the fire that that I ended up realizing, hey, not everybody had this normal upbringing where, your dad has 2 or 3 businesses that he's starting and he's always like working on something, and so he, to that end, he and my mom ended up having a couple of single family rentals. So they live in one home and then they ended up moving and they're like, well, let's just hang on to it and rent it out, right? And so I ended up seeing real estate when I was in middle school and high school from that perspective, from the single families perspective. Except, I ended up seeing some things that went well and some things that didn't go quite as well also with the properties. And that's just by the nature of the asset class and like where the assets were located and things like that. And so actually once I finished graduate school, when I was 23, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and everything just kind of like clicked for me. It was all these things that I knew were right because I'd seen it growing up and I was raised this way, but I didn't have anything concrete to put it to, right? And so once I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when I was, I guess almost 10 years ago now, everything kind of clicked for me. So I knew I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get involved in real estate in some form or fashion. And I don't always want to have to depend on somebody else for my income, but I didn't have it. I couldn't quite figure out the avenue for myself, Jason. So I explored different things along the way. I lived in LA at the time. For 9 years, I lived in LA where you're located, and so I looked at like investing in California. I looked at like, okay, do I do like a duplex or a fourplex, maybe Arizona because it's close by. Like I explored stuff with my brother and looking at different things. But ultimately it was once I was able to invest passively where I was like, okay, this is what makes the most sense for me at this stage. And so I had the opportunity to invest passively just about 4 years ago now into 2 different assets here in Central Texas. And so I'll get to, the here in Central Texas part, right? But had the opportunity to invest passively. My then girlfriend, now wife, ended up investing alongside of me in one of the deals. And then just given our goals and where we were at with everything, we ended up deciding, okay, well, we're going to need to probably leave and move at some point out of California to achieve just what our own personal goals were and stop being on the passive side and be able to be on the active side. And so with that, at the end of 2020, we ended up moving to Texas. And so we live in Austin now. And, we started our podcast last year in 2020 as well, like you mentioned. And then had the opportunity to be on the active side earlier this year in April. And so we're GPs in a deal here in town. And we're just, focused on being able to provide more investment opportunities for people and then be able to achieve our own personal goals that we have. And then, bring our communities along with us with being able to invest as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, kind of a lot of things I think that we can kind of touch on there that I think are pretty cool about your story. One is just, I mean, I think growing up in the environment of having, an entrepreneurial family is, as you said, like that's not probably not the norm, right? Most people don't, kind of they see their parents going to work, having a W-2 job, going to work, coming home, working that 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And it's when you have someone close to you like that that has that sort of, they have the entrepreneurial spirit, they're building businesses, all of that. It definitely, I think, opens up your eye. For me, that was my uncle. And it's just kind of a cool. Now, I wasn't smart enough to get into the entrepreneurial thing as soon as you did, but I think that just having that sort of mentality of, I want to work for myself. I want to make things happen for my family. And that's, probably more easily achievable as an entrepreneur than it is in a W-2 job. Although I think most people don't think that, and they see it as risky. Maybe talk about that, just kind of what you saw with your family and how that impacted you. I know you said you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that sort of put it in words what you were already sort of feeling. So you're young, like how did that feel kind of growing up, going through that process?
Yeah. Well, it's like my mom and my dad, they're very different people. Like my dad is very much like a sales and marketing person, and my mom is very much an operations person, right? And a finance person. So it's like one's more concerned about revenue and the other's concerned about expenses. And so there's always like that healthy push and pull, so to speak.
Right.
But yet, I guess, I'm thinking about the question about, you said how I end up feeling. I would say I was more impacted by my dad in that respect than I was by my mom. I'm not like a super frugal person the way that my mom is, and I got more of like the entrepreneurial sort of bug, if you will, from that angle. Because it's like, even when I was 25, like I started like this own like a fitness business and like an online fitness business too. I mean, growing, and that's when I was 25. If we go back even further, when I was in high school, I would tutor people in like calculus and pre-calc. And then I would sell stuff on eBay. And all of these things were just normal. My brother, he would grow crops in the backyard and sell them. But this was, I think he was 10 or so when he was doing this. So it's like all these things were so normal for us, Jason. It was just like, oh, if you want money, well, just go sell something or start something. And none of these were like groundbreaking ideas or anything, but it was just, like I said, it was just very normal, just seeing the like the example that my parents set, particularly my dad. Even, I mean, even if I go back further, like we have our own podcast now, right? But my dad had his own radio program, and I remember, it's so funny, these things that are full circle as you become an adult and like you reflect on them. I ended up interviewing one of my teachers on my dad's radio program. He had a radio program once a week, and I interviewed her, and I was like in second grade. And my dad was like, he put us in these certain positions, like, hey, you're gonna interview your teacher. I was like, okay, I guess I'm interviewing my teacher. Like,
Yeah.
But
Why not?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, it's always normal until you realize it's like, oh, not everybody ends up growing up like this. Like this isn't quite normal. And the irony of it is that I went to school, I ended up getting a graduate degree, and even now I'm still working a full-time job, right? But the plan always was and always is like, I'm going to be doing my own thing. That's where things have to end up moving toward eventually.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think, you said it's not it's not groundbreaking, but in a way it is, right? Because most people learn to just go get a job. And so that, although it sounds simple when you say, oh, my brother's growing crops, I'm selling things on eBay, like, but that it's easier to not do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's easier to just either not do any of it and not care, or just, I'm going to get a job. You know what I mean? It's like, for me, it was, well, and I think you sort of touched on, I would say maybe the scarcity mindset, right? Like if your dad is just, when people are frugal, they probably look at money like there's not enough. And so I have to, kind of always be careful about it. Whereas the other side of that is the abundance mindset and like that entrepreneurial spirit, where it's like, there's going to be money. I'll figure it out. And for me, it was always, I'll just work more. And so maybe, I guess that was a little bit entrepreneurial, because I would take on side jobs in construction
Yeah.
like that. Right. So it wasn't, but it's, I do think that's not necessarily the norm. And it's even, you're working a full-time job and doing your real estate, doing your podcast. I'm sure you get similar questions to what I do. It's like, well, how do you have time for that stuff? And it's like, well, you have time for it too. Like it,
Right.
right? We have
Yeah.
the same hours in the day. It's no different. So it's just a matter of how you choose to use it. So that's really cool. You mentioned, kind of your parents' dynamic from business standpoint, and people always talk about how, sort of a business partner it's good to have someone who's like opposite or contrary strengths to you, and sounds like that was the case for your parents. How does that work for you and Daisy? Is that, kind of what roles do each of you play in your business?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess for background for the listeners, it's like we're a husband and wife team,
Right.
right? And we have,
Shouldn't have skipped that.
yeah. We've created, well, it's like you already know the story, so it makes sense. But we created Make It Rain Capital, and for us, I mean, Daisy, if she was able to, so she had her wisdom teeth removed. I was telling you off air, and so she's on the sideline. She's recovering still, but for her, she wasn't even interested in real estate initially. It was like, she's like, this is boring. There's a bunch of guys, like guys network very differently than women do. And she was just like, she was in education her entire career. And so we have very, very, I would say, different skill sets for sure. I would say it's complementary for the most part. She's more of a people person than I am. I'm more of a numbers person, even though like I kind of head up sales and marketing for us. So I take care of, I guess to answer your question, like I take care of like sales and marketing, broker relations. Because of our schedule, she does tours though. So there's, you get in where you fit in, so to speak. I do underwriting on our end. She handles a lot more of the investor relations. We both do, but more of it falls on her. And then she has more ability and flexibility to go to a lot more networking events than I'm able to as well. So they're complementary in that way. But I think, for myself, I've always wanted to have my own business and have it be successful and be able to achieve, financial freedom and like attain or achieve my own like capability, or what my ability is, like reach my potential, right? And for her, when she realized, okay, well, I can retire my parents, or I can provide a better life for my future children, that's where the light bulb clicked, or the switch clicked, and she was thinking, okay, this is something I should pursue more, and this vehicle of real estate, and like specifically multifamily, makes sense for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, that probably just speaks back to also, we've been talking a lot about sort of that upbringing, where if you're raised in that environment of, go to school, get a job, do the sort of what normal, normal life is supposed to be like. I do think I see this when I talk to other people about investing, and I talk to friends and family and stuff. And it's just like, there's always this, it's almost like they don't trust it or something.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like this, well, not what we normally do, or that's not what's expected of us, and all of that stuff. And then it's like, sometimes you want to just say, well, look around at the who's wealthy, right?
Right.
People with real estate, right? Like that's and who's poor? People that work a 9 to 5 job. It's just kind of like, and and I don't mean that even necessarily from a money standpoint. Like if you just look at it from a time control and financial freedom, like you don't have to be Jeff Bezos, or so, you don't have to be the richest person there is. It's just about, taking control of your life, basically, I think. And if you have a job and that's your only source, you're not in control. You're kind of at the mercy of that job.
Yeah. And, I mean, the thing is, I think a lot of it, like with upbringing, I think a lot of it too is that people get conditioned in one form or fashion or another to think that doing something on your own is risky, or investing is risky, right? It's like, well, you're always doing something, whether it's it's like you're investing whether or not you know it or not. Like you're working for yourself whether or not you know it or not. Either you yourself are the little business and you export, or you hire out your services to an employer, or you're literally doing it and you have large capital, or you have make it rain capital and you end up doing it that way. So it's like you're doing it anyway, but I think, I don't know if it's schooling, or I don't know if it's like media or what. I'm kind of thinking out loud, but it's interesting because I end up seeing that with in certain times, like not as much anymore, but you do see it still nonetheless, Jason.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that was actually I like what you said there in the sense that you're investing somehow, right? You're investing. I, I guess I would take it a step further and say, if you work for someone else, you're investing for them,
Right.
right? You're
100%.
making them money that they're probably investing, right? So
Hmm.
you might as well be the one to sort of take control of that. So it's just kind of it's just I get passionate about this stuff because I mean I'm like, and for anyone listening, like I didn't figure this out until a couple of years ago. It's not like I'm like this person who thought this way all my life. Like I've always worked a lot, but I never put the money to work for me until
Mm.
relatively recently. And I think that's really what it comes down to is you have to, it's okay to have a W-2 job. I still have a W-2 job. I love doing what I do. Like it's fine. I I don't there's it's not to knock that. It's just a matter of like having a way to figure out that that's not your sole reliance.
Right.
So
Yeah.
um no, this stuff, like I always get super excited about talking about this. But let's talk a little bit just about your actual real estate investing business. And you said you started with some passive investments, and now you've gotten active. So maybe walk us through that. Tell us, you know, a little bit about what you've learned from each, and some
Mm.
takeaways.
Yeah, so yeah, about 4 years ago, like I was saying, ended up investing passively into a deal. And it came through because my roommate at the time ended up knowing the one of the lead sponsors. And so that's how I ended up getting connected. And it was right time, right place, right? And so that was 192 unit in San Antonio. And I put in, a small amount of capital relative to the overall, but it was a way to get started. And then a lot of education, of course. I think a lot of times people will talk about, well, invest passively first, you learn, and then you can get on the active side. It's like you can learn, but you can be a passive investor. You can be like an active passive investor, right? Like if you advocate for yourself, or if you actually dig in and try to understand what's going on, like you're going to get a hell of a lot more out of it than you will if you just sit back, don't read the reports, and you just end up getting the distribution. So ended up doing that. And it was funny too because we Daisy and I ended up meeting with one of the lead sponsors for dinner because he's in LA too. He's part of Wildhorn Capital, Reed Goosens.
Okay.
Um, and it was funny because way back then I need to tell Reed this. I've been thinking about this the past few weeks. He ended up saying like, "Hey, you guys, like maybe you should like get on the active side." I was like, "No, I don't want to do that. No, I'll just do this. Like this will be fine. Like I'll just do this. And so it's just funny thinking back to that. But to get back to your original question, ended up doing that one, and then I did that by myself. And then Daisy and I, we put money in together on actually Wildhorn's second deal. That was their first one. Their second one, and that was 256 doors in San Antonio as well. Thankfully, the first one's going full cycle here soon, so that'll be good. And then just ended up doing more education and like learning, reading reports, underwriting, due diligence, like secret shopping the properties even. So we did quite a bit of due diligence, I would say, not only meeting the sponsors and trying to vet the business plan and understand it, but I ended up taking their underwriting and did my own and wrote my own spreadsheet. I'm an engineer by education, and so that was a way for me to understand which levers pushed and pulled which way and try to understand the mechanics of it a bit better. We actually flew out to San Antonio too before we invested in the second one. We flew out to San Antonio and actually secret shopped it because it's like, well, we're putting in like triple the money. So we wanted to have some surety for sure. And so we secret shopped it and looked at the area, like tried to see what like kind of cars were around there, try to see like how property management was when we got greeted, or are they trying to close us in terms of trying to sign a lease, all of that sort of stuff. And then Yeah, just kind of like read a lot of that stuff for a year or two, and then Daisy. I'm like going through the story here as I'm thinking the history. Daisy was she actually got involved with an organization called the Women's Real Estate Network, which actually has a very strong chapter in LA. And she ended up doing a course called The Art of Raising Capital, and COVID hit, and it was like, okay, so how are you going to raise capital now? And so hence the podcast got started, and then we're like, well, maybe we should formalize this, and got the ball rolling. And like I mentioned before, we ended up moving out to Texas here, and now and then had the opportunity to be on the active side. And so we're just, we're focused here in Austin, and then focused in San Antonio as well, which is about an hour and a half away. And we look for deals in both markets, and looking to continue to grow and be able to grow the business.
Cool. Yeah. And I think your point about you can be active or passive investor, like you can literally just give someone else your money, let them make you money, and that's fine. Or
Yeah.
you can try and, learn as much about it. And I think a lot of people do start that way. I did the same thing, sort of invested. But I also would say, and tell me if you agree, doing that, you can learn to be a passive investor, and you can learn how to make really good decisions as a passive investor. But I don't think it necessarily teaches you how to be on the active side of it, right? You're going to get the tidbits and things like that, but it's very eye-opening when you come around the other side and actually do the active deals yourself. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your active investment deal where you were on the GP side.
Yes, so that one's it's a 42 unit here in Austin. We're about 10 minutes from it where we live, which is great. We're pretty centrally located, and I know for a fact if we didn't move out here that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to end up being on the GP side of things. It's like local presence, like knowing the sponsorship group, understanding the market, like all of those things had a factor in it, right? And so for us, that was like proof positive of like, okay, well, we feel like we made the right choice in moving out, and leaving our family and everything that we had known for so long. So this deal, it's in the path of progress. For anybody who's like familiar with LA, it's probably like similar to like an Inglewood or like a Mid City or like a Crenshaw, where it's like, okay, it's path of progress. We know that's being gentrified, or maybe like a Boyle Heights. We know it's being gentrified. It'll take a little bit of time, but there's definitely like pockets where the path of progress is occurring. So it's a classic value add play of being able to renovate, turn over the resident base, increase rents, and then exit. So far it's been performing very, very well. And we're happy that things are moving forward well. And it's definitely completely different being on the active side than the passive side, because it's like you can see behind the screen, so to speak, and see how the sausage gets made. It's not just oh, you get a report. It's a matter of like keeping the business plan going and seeing where budgets are falling and landing based, especially now with appliances and getting supplies and all of that. Like that's been an extremely difficult thing for quite some time, for the past year and a half. But overall, it's definitely going well, and we're happy to have been a part of it. It's been awesome for us.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, Austin's a super hot market. I mean, I know there's few other markets that are as hot as
Yeah.
Austin is right now. So that's a fantastic place to be. Like you're almost, you're almost guaranteed that sort of appreciation portion of it, just because the market's exploding. So that's great. What role are you doing on that, sort of GP side? Are you asset managing or capital raising, or what's kind of your part of it?
Yeah, so for us, the main piece was capital raising, and then we're doing some asset management, but it's really like from a support perspective at this point. And so those have been like the two main roles for us. And so like on future deals, right? Like our role will be finding the deal, some capital raising, and then asset management, of course, being local and being able to go to the properties same day pretty easily. So it's been like a good way to get our feet wet, so to speak, and then continue to grow from there. So it's kind of like a progression all the way along, Jason.
Yeah. And are you looking to focus like strictly around San Antonio because it's local to you, or are you going to look outside of that market? And I think your point about, sort of moving there and being close and how that impacted you finding this deal, I think is huge. And it's something that I think we said this a little bit before we started recording, but like being here in LA, it's not impossible, but it's harder to find, sort of those cash flowing deals. Now, if you're looking for appreciation, that's you can do that in LA, but it's a harder situation than like Texas or the Southwest or Southeast. Sorry. Are you looking to focus on assets that are close to you and you can sort of be within drive distance, or do you plan to expand that, the markets that you look in?
Yeah, so far we have been pretty hyper focused, within San Antonio and Austin. We look a little bit over in Houston and we look a little bit in Dallas, which are 2.5 to 3 hours from us. But being in Austin, like living in Austin, and then getting to know block by block what's going on, and then being so quick to go. Like today, Daisy was down in San Antonio. She was able to tour 4 properties. It's like she's there and back same day, right? So it's like that feels like a huge advantage that we have, because Daisy's able. So I still work full time, but Daisy's make it rain full time, and so moving out here, she has the ability, and we have the ability to have her focus on real estate full time, which is a big blessing for sure. So just being just being very local, we do plan to end up looking here. But I mean, I don't know, those other markets that I'm like, well, if we lived there, I'd be super focused. If we lived in Nashville or Georgia or Atlanta
Yeah.
or certain parts of Florida, it's like we'd be super focused in those areas as
Right,
well.
right.
The Carolinas for that matter, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in a great market, might as well focus on that market, right?
Right.
Easier to, and you are, Austin is so central to San Antonio and Houston, and I mean, I guess maybe Dallas is a little bit further, but like even those three cities, as you said, like you can be. I used to live in Houston, like we had friends in Austin.
Oh, nice.
It was easy
Yeah.
for us to kind of drive back and forth. There wasn't like you don't have to get on a plane. It's not you could do it in a day if you wanted to. Especially like Austin to San Antonio is even closer. So those are all good cities, good markets, kind of good places to be able to look and be close enough. So it makes sense, I think, to be there. It helps you. And as you mentioned, she can go tour, she can tour properties very easily. So that's great. Well, that's cool. What's your, I guess, what's your goal? What's your plan? Maybe over this, we're coming to the end of 2021. What do you guys have set out to, on your radar to do over the next year or so?
Yeah. So, if timing works out, then we'd love to be able to close on another property, or at least be under contract for something before the end of the year, depending on how things go, and then to continue from there. So some deals we have the potential to JV if they are small enough. But then also, if you have like a 20 unit deal in Austin isn't a 20 unit deal everywhere, right? Because of where pricing's at. So sometimes it'd get JV'd, sometimes it wouldn't, just depending on what it looks like. But yeah, continue to acquire properties, and be able to grow and have more investors, of course. And yeah, I mean, a big part of it is just being able to provide more financial opportunities and more access and education for millennials. I mean, we talk about that a lot on our podcast and within Make It Rain, and kind of like, okay, like this is why we exist. We feel like there's a lot of opportunity out there, and it's just a matter of literally evangelizing the message. You and me, we're in like this, like we're in like the it's like a fish when it's swimming, it doesn't realize that it's in water, right? It's almost like that. Like we are like, oh yeah, this is so common, everybody knows, because we see all the same faces all the time, we get the same messaging. But there's so many people who still have no idea. So it's like the work that you're doing and the work that we're doing ends up making like a huge impact, with people being able to realize like, oh, I can have a little bit of like financial security here that potentially I didn't have before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, for you, you're focused as sort of like on the millennials as the group that you're helping. For me, I'm trying to help other veterinarians, right? It's like you sort of pick your I would help. I'm happy to help anyone invest, right? But it's like ultimately coming from that background, you see you see where the education really is just missing in terms of what's available. It's not even so much like you don't for people to invest passively, you don't have to know how to you don't know have to know how to invest actively. You don't have to know how to take care of the properties, but what you need to know is that it's available. You need to know,
Right.
the opportunities are there. And so that's why I think it's really important that with the podcasts, with social media, with all of that, that's what we're sort of the focus is to get that out there, and then just talking to everybody, right? And like like maybe some people are annoyed by it, and I'm sorry, but that's kind of it's like no, let me tell you how you can get ahead. Like this is actually, once
Mhm.
you figure it out, it's not crazy, it's not hard to do. Like you just have to start doing it. um and so, well, that's actually probably a pretty good segue, and you touched a little bit on it, but maybe we can dive into kind of the questions I like to ask every guest. And so the first one, has to do with the name of the podcast, but what is your why? What kind of drives you? And I know you touched a bit on it, but maybe you can expand on that.
I think, I mean, my own personal why is, I end up looking back at like my dad, right? He ended up coming here from a third world country. He came from Trinidad when he was 20, right? And ended up working like 2 and 3 jobs at a time. And so I look at his life and like I look at my mom and the sacrifices that she's made. Like she was born here, but she had humble beginnings as well. And her parents were from other countries. And so I end up looking at that and it's like, I just think of all the sacrifices that my grandparents have made on both sides and this my ancestors. And I think that there's just a lot of possibility that I personally have. And that it would almost be a waste not to take advantage of all the opportunities, especially, I mean, I was born in America and I have a degree. Like it would be like a godsend for so many people in the rest of the world, probably like a billion or more people, if they could trade places with me, even on my worst day. It would be a miracle for them if they could live on my worst day. And I end up thinking about that, and I just think that there's a lot of opportunity that I end up having here. America isn't perfect, right? But it's one of the most perfect imperfect places if you have to choose somewhere to be in the world. And so I think about all of that, and that ends up fueling me to end up saying, okay, like I have so much potential and I have so much that I'm capable of, and it's incumbent upon me not to waste that opportunity. And to be honest, it's not just me. I think it's you. I think it's all of your listeners. I think it's all of us, because inherently, I think we all are very strong people. We if we weren't strong people, our ancestors wouldn't have been strong people, because they wouldn't have survived whatever. It's evolutionary biology and Darwinism. Like they just literally wouldn't have survived, right? So
That's
I think about I think about that, and it's like there's I don't know, there's just so much opportunity and there's so much that we're capable of. And like I said, I feel like it's incumbent upon me to be able to take advantage of all those opportunities that have been afforded me, just by almost sheer chance. So that's really what my why is, like reaching my full potential and taking and doing right by my ancestors.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's perspective, right? It's perspective and it's gratitude,
Yeah.
right? It's really that kind of that simple. It's exactly what you said, right? There's so many, we like to complain here in America, and about how hard things are, whatever it is, like things that aren't going our way, but in reality, we have pretty good, and it's so much better than many, and it's just being grateful for that, and recognizing it, right? And then, as you said, now we have to do something with those opportunities, right? If it's maybe not enough to just be like, yeah, this is great, I'm lucky to be here. Like now let's try and make a difference. So I think that's super cool.
For sure.
um Okay, next question then. Tell us something about yourself that maybe isn't common knowledge, and this might be hard since you have your own podcast and you've probably shared a lot, but maybe a hobby or a special skill that people don't know.
Mm. I mean, something that I read, I would say I'm like a nerd at heart. So like I read a lot when I was a kid, like a lot of novels, and even now I'm still reading. So like I'm reading the Born Supremacy right now. And so I still read novels when I can. I try to make a little bit of time to be able to do that. So I don't read novels. It's been a long time since I've read a novel. I go on these stints where it's like I won't read for like months or a year, and then I'll just like dive in and do 3 books over the course of a couple months. So, um, yeah, that's something, I don't think I've talked about that much on our podcast. I was trying to think of something I haven't talked about, Jason.
Yeah.
I think it's that, like reading novels, like reading fiction.
Yeah, I do. My reading is very like binges. It's like, okay, I really want to read, and then it's like you'll read like 3 or 4 books in a row and then not do anything for a while. Okay, well, since you mentioned Born Supremacy, do you like to have seen the movies? Like, have you
Oh,
if you're reading a book that has a movie associated with it, do you like to have seen them? Because I feel like almost always, if you've read the book, the movie might be disappointing.
yeah, I've experienced that. I mean, I'm trying to think of books that have like I think any Tom Clancy movie, they're not as good as the novels. I've only read 1 or 2, but they haven't been as good. I read Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. The movie was not good. Comparably, uh, even the Born Identity, the first third of the plot is the same, and then they're completely different.
Right.
So I'm not opposed to it, but I also like I read Dune. That's it's like this seminal science fiction book. I thought it was horrible. I read it earlier this year. I just didn't get it, but I'm really excited about the movie, which comes out on Thursday.
Yeah,
So
it looks like it's going to be good. I mean, it's funny. I never read that one, or because they've done Dune like 4 times now. I don't think I've ever seen any of them, but but yeah, no, it looks at least the previews for this one look really good. I especially when I was younger, like huge Stephen King fan. I read literally every Stephen King book. So I probably started reading them too young because I would have nightmares about it, but it didn't stop me. I just kept like, I'm gonna read the next one and the next one. And I don't know that I've seen a Stephen King movie that I liked. Like they're just, it's very hard, I think, to some of these books to translate. Like it's just, so yeah. When you said that, I was like, I wonder what. It's an interesting perspective on actually reading the book and then seeing the movies. Like all the people that read the Harry Potter books and stuff like that. It's just kind of like there's a lot of them out there, and I think if you realize that they're separate entities, right? Like the movie's a movie and the book's a books, and it's likely they're not going to be the same. So you can't want them to be the same. You just have to try and enjoy them for what they are.
I
So
think not to belabor the point, but I'm not a horror movie fan at all. Like even a scary book I read, it was like Running Man or something by Stephen King. It was one of his books, but it's more of a thriller, not horror. Like It and Cujo, and I'm like, I could never do any of those. Like there's no, maybe The Green Mile. But it's like I don't even know how you would read something like that. Like that'd be hard. Like you said, it'd be hard to sleep at night.
I will say it. I guess I have to take it back. The Green Mile is a pretty good movie, and actually Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption is a Stephen King. Not that there are no good ones, but a lot of them I think didn't translate. All right, that's good. We could talk about this for a long time, I think, but won't keep you all day with that. How I know we'll get it all in the show notes and stuff, but how do you want people to reach out to you when they hear this and want to know more about you? And obviously they can listen to your podcast and stuff.
Yeah, I mean the best place to go now is our website because everything is there. I mean, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and on YouTube and LinkedIn for social media. And we have our podcast, of course. You can just search "Make It Rain" and it'll come up. But I mean, really, it's our website. I'd say you can email me. It's Luc at makeitraincapital.com. It's LUC. But everything is on our website too. That points in any direction to anything that we're doing. So I'd say. I have a very limited calendar because of the nature of how things are. Much like yourself, there's a lot of moving parts, right? But I mean, I'd say reach out if you have a question about something, and if I don't know the answer, like I say this all the time, if I don't know the answer, like there's plenty of people that I know. I'll try to point you to the right resource, whether it's in multifamily or just another part of real estate, whether it's like single family or like we're talking like small multis, like 4 units or something like that. I mean, I'm more than happy to help and share.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Luc, final question. What piece of advice would you give people that are, a little bit farther back in their journey than you are? Someone who's kind of getting started like you were a year or so ago. What would you tell them to help encourage them and guide them?
I always would first ask what their goal is. If their goal is to, let's say their goal is to have like so many people to have financial freedom, and if it's their goal is the same thing as mine, I would say, get around the right people. Like Grant Cardone, love him or hate him, he says that creativity is followed by commitment. So, we got very creative during the pandemic about how to network and how to be able to like get around people who we felt like would end up helping us and who would be mentors to us in different forms and fashions. So I would say, get around the right people. A lot of people focus on the educational piece, which is important. And, I'm all for that, like reading and webinars, et cetera. But I mean, really it's like people are the ones who are going to make the biggest difference. Like it's not just the knowledge, but it's like getting to the right people that will help you grow leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I as someone who thought I'll just have to educate myself enough to be able to do it, it doesn't. The net worth being your net worth being your network is kind of a, I don't know, I guess a cliche saying, but it's actually pretty true. And it wasn't until I sort of really started to focus on that, networking and relationships and stuff like that, that I saw things really pick up. So yeah, you're 100% right. It's just something that you have to get around, get around the people that are doing it, and that will really help you get there.
And then ultimately it becomes kind of fun, right? So like something that we did, or that I did, was in like April, May, right? When like everything went virtual in 2020, like I would take screenshots of like Zoom. Now you see this all the time. I'm not gonna say I invented it, but I thought of it early on. But it's like you take a screenshot.
Nobody's gonna know the difference. You heard it here, folks. Invented the screenshot of Zoom meetings.
Yeah, but I would like do that, and like I would tag everybody and say like, oh, these are my big takeaways and all of that. And then you end up building up this network, which is really awesome. But then it's cool now to be able to go to in-person stuff. Like if there's conferences, we're going to one this weekend, we're at one last month. And it's almost like this, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, Jason, but it's almost like this like family reunion, so to speak, or it's almost like a class reunion where you're just around a bunch of people that you've seen. And it's like, oh, I get to meet you in person. Like, this is so cool because you've only seen them virtually for so long. So that's another benefit of, being able to grow your network.
Right. Yeah. And I do look forward to that. It's funny, with COVID, everything was shut down, and then we had a baby. So it was like, I've had this like constant reason why probably travel and large groups wasn't a good idea. But yeah, I think we're starting to get to the tail end of that, and my baby's getting older. And so I look forward to getting to those conferences, and because I agree, even just seeing the images on social media, it's like, just looks like a bunch of friends like getting together and hang out. So it looks pretty cool. And then I think, you always hear about people that, sort of connect at a conference and then go on to partner on deals or form a company together, or whatever the case may be. I think that stuff's hugely important. So awesome, Luc. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time and all of your wisdom. It's been awesome conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you providing a platform and being able to connect, and we'll be doing a podcast swap, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, because more people need to know. And like I said, evangelizing the message is important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Well, I will let you go, and we will say goodbye, everyone. I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.